Jim, welcome in. Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Looking forward to talking it over with you. We'll start at the very beginning. Born on February 20th, 1941. Yeah. What is your earliest memory?
My earliest memory was I was in my baby crib, and my cousin, who was also my godmother, was staying with us at the time. And I was raising hell, I guess, in my baby crib. And she came in and admonished me that if I didn't be quiet and lay down and take my nap, she was going to go next door and call the devil on me.
Call the devil?
That's why I remember that. Yeah, and I was probably 18 months old at the time.
Oh, my goodness.
So I laid down, and that was it. Okay?
Wow,
yeah.
I'm going to use that on my 1-year-old this evening. I didn't know that was even in play.
Oh, God. I didn't know the year-and-a-half-year-olds knew what the devil was.
Right, yeah. Look at you. Very astute.
Yeah, my mother was Scotch-Irish, though, so I knew what the devil was.
Yeah, you'd probably already been threatened a bunch.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family. Mother, father, siblings. What was your...
Well, at the moment that I remember, I was one of two boys.
Okay.
My older brother was 8 years older than me. And my mother's family has been in America since 1633.
Whoa.
And my father was new to America. He was German. Lumma doesn't sound German.
Right.
It's not. That's Viking.
Oh,
but, yeah.
Right.
But my grandparents came from Germany. My father was the first born here. He was born in Kentucky, in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania, right.
And then my grandparents, as most new people to this country, didn't speak English, got menial jobs.
Right.
So he went to work in the coal mines in Pennsylvania, which were very dangerous places to work because they'd been there for 100 years and they were collapsing. Mm-hmm. So he found about the new coal mines that were opening up in Illinois, and they moved to Illinois, and those were new and modern mines with ventilation and all this kind of thing. So my father was there. My mother's people were the first generation after the Civil War, and they were from Kentucky, and everything was decimated and stolen from them there. And so there was nothing to support children after the war, maybe for one child, but not for the rest of them. So they moved to Illinois, and that's where my mom and dad met. And when you look at your parents' young age, it pretty much mirrors what I went through. My mom was 14, and her girlfriend told her that there was a young man that played the saxophone, and you got to meet this Henry Lumma. So in those days, they rolled up the rug in the living room, and the kids in the neighborhood came over and had a dance, and somebody played music. Mm-hmm. So that was my dad playing the saxophone, and they were smitten, and 4 years later, they were married.
How about that? That's a great story.
That's the same path that my wife and I took. She had her girlfriend to ask me if I'd like to take her on a double date. And my wife is the perfect woman. She really, isn't she, Bridget? Yeah. So she was drop dead gorgeous. She was only 14. She was a freshman in high school. We went to Mercy High School. And I was a sophomore, and I had a car. And she had 25 cents for gas. So it was a perfect match.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So we went on roller skating, and I had a coupe, and all four of us in the front seat of that coupe. And I taught her how to shift gears, and we took the other couple home at the end of our skating, and then I took her to a little amusement park out by the airport. I didn't want that day to end. And then after that, I took her to Steak and Shake, and Steak and Shake became our regular place to go after school.
Good spot.
Yeah, it wasn't a cheapie.
Yeah, that's
First
right.
class, yeah.
I'd forgotten about it since they're all basically gone as you and I are sitting here. But that was expensive, but it was good. It was worth it.
So on our second date, she asked me if I would like to go to her grandmother's house for dinner on Sunday because it was her birthday, Barbara's birthday. And that's a big step.
Yeah.
From roller skating to going to grandma's house.
Yeah.
So after that date, I took her home, and when I let her out of the car, I said, if someday I would ask you to marry me, would you? She just turned 15. She said yes. So I knew where the rest of my life was going. And that was 67 years ago. Oh, yeah, wow.
Goodness.
So we jumped forward here, but when
But it ties into how talking about your parents and how they met. So it's perfect.
They parallel each other.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you must have made a really positive impression. As you said, you went from roller skating to meeting family.
Oh, she was beautiful. I mean, she was the prettiest girl in the freshman class. She only weighed 98 pounds. At that time, she was 5'2", and she had a perfect figure.
Yeah.
Legs are my thing. Yeah. You look at Marilyn Monroe. You know who Marilyn Monroe is? Beautiful lady. You see her in a swimming pool. She didn't have legs on. She didn't have legs at all. She had everything above the legs. But Barbara had beautiful legs and just perfect. And I often tell her she smelled good.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. You know what I remember? I remember Dentine chewing gum.
Sure.
And Jergens hand lotion.
Yeah.
The two of those combined, that's my wife.
Is that right?
And that's a beautiful smell to me.
That's so vivid.
I remember the little things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, once you started at 1.5, you're obviously bringing it with the memory.
So we dated for 5 years, and then when she was 19 and I was 21, we were married. And here's another parallel there. My youngest daughter, Heather, let me back up a little bit. My father died when I was 8.
Okay.
And he was my champion. He really was. And in 1948, after the war, housing was in big demand. And my dad was a carpenter. He acquired 4 lots from his brother-in-law, who was a builder in Alton. And he started building some houses. And he would take me with him on Saturday, with just little tyke, to see how things were going and teach me a few things. And then in 48, he started having stomach problems, and they attributed it to stomach ulcers. And it got worse and worse, and they finally were going to do surgery on his stomach. So I watched him. My father was a German. He dressed to the nines with the suit and the vest and the spats over his shoes and his Homburg hat. And he packed a suitcase and went down the stairs and got into a taxi cab. And that's the last time he ever came home. They opened him up, and it was pancreatic cancer. Oh, man. And they said when the air hit it, it just spread like that. They just closed him back up, and then 8 days later he died. And that was the last I saw of my father.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So he goes to see the doctor thinking he has stomach
ulcers. There were no specialties then.
Right.
He had stomach pains, and they diagnosed it as ulcers. Yeah.
And so they open him up to perform surgery. It turns out it's pancreatic cancer, which even as we sit here now, Jim, in 2024, that's usually a death sentence.
Yeah, 10% survival rate.
But you're talking 1948, correct?
No, this was he went in 1949.
49, okay.
My dad's birthday is New Year's Eve.
Okay.
So he went in when he was 44 years old.
Wow. Geez.
And then he turned his birthday in there. And I've still got all the gifts that they gave him in the hospital. My dad was an avid hunter and fisherman, a Renaissance man. And they took his shotgun to Browning's Arms. Browning Arms used to be in St. Louis. And Browning Arms was one of the customers that my dad had. If they needed office remodel or whatever they needed at Browning Arms, my dad did it, and they loved him down there. So his brother took his shotgun down to Browning Arms, on the spur of the moment, and they took it down and re-blued it and made it look like brand new. And my dad also was, back in those days, 8mm motion pictures. Not many people had them in the 40s, but we had them, and he had a splicing machine. He wanted a splicer to splice his film with. So they got him that for his birthday and a few other things, and I've still got them all. And my mama had 4 boys. I was the second born, and my youngest brother, I think, was like 16, 17 months old when my dad died. So here's my mother and my dad was very frugal with money. We didn't have very much, but we didn't have very much because my dad put it all in the bank. Mm-hmm. So he built a couple of houses in Alton on those lots that he bought, and they were all paid for out of his pocket. And he sold them contract for deed. So Mama had income from 2 of the houses that he built until, till it was paid up 20 years later. So
Wow.
I can remember when she was still getting checks on those contracts for deed.
Wow.
So that helped Mama, and I had saints for aunts, and they all helped. And my one aunt in Jerseyville, who was a wealthy lady, who was not my mom's sister, but my mom's sister-in-law, my dad's sister.
Okay.
She would send my mom $50, which was a lot of money back then. That paid for the rent on the place where we lived until she remarried. So I'm skipping back and forth in time zones here.
No, I follow your line of thought. I want to ask you this, because, I mean, if you're 8 years old, and even if you're not, quote unquote, close with your father, it would be devastating.
Yeah.
But you made a comment earlier that stood out to me. He was your champion. I mean, so you obviously either thought incredibly highly of him or very close to him, or probably both.
Both, yeah.
Why was that? And therefore, I would imagine it perhaps devastated you more than your average 8-year-old because of that.
I think because my father was in business for himself and he was a carpenter, he tried to teach me as much as he could from the moment of my understanding, you know. Back in those days, storm sash weren't aluminum storm sash. You had storm windows that you put on your primary window in the wintertime, and in the summertime you had screens that you hung on there.
Yeah.
Well, my dad was building some screens for a customer out in, not too far from here in Ladue, and he was building them at our house, and he showed me the procedures. And I took the scraps and I tried to emulate what he was doing. And then when he took me to the houses he was building in Alton, he was laying the concrete blocks, and he showed me how to strike joints on masonry work. I was 8 years old. But he tried to show me as much as he could, and he'd take me hunting and fishing. And so he was my dad. He was a good man. Yeah. So he was dearly missed, and I didn't fully appreciate death at that time, you know.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when my dad left and he died, and they buried him, I wouldn't even go to the funeral, you know.
Oh, you didn't go to the funeral?
No, because my dad was coming back. And I didn't fully appreciate death until Mom sold all the clothes out of his closet. Then I knew my dad wasn't coming back. You know. So, with the help of her sisters who came to watch us boys while she went to beauty school to improve herself, and with my aunt in Jerseyville who sent her money, she made it through. And she sent all us boys to Catholic schools, Catholic high schools. When we moved from the city to the county, her prime objective was to buy a house that was close to Catholic schools and close to transportation, so she could make it. At that point, she had already graduated from the beauty college, and she opened up a beauty parlor at the end of Delmar. And Delmar ended at McKnight at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And that was brand new part of the world. It
Yeah.
was Oak Brook Forest was the name of that area. And she had the bus right there at the top of hill of Brown Road, and I was 150 feet from school. So that was a bad thing.
That's pretty close.
And my brother Richard, who was 8 years older than I, he forewent going to college to help Mom until she remarried. And at that point, he was 21, and he started at St. Louis University. And he got a degree in electrical engineering in 3.5 years.
Wow.
Not 4, 5, 6, 7 years like kids do today.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Because he was working half a day and going to school half a day. He was smart, but he was my friend too. He took my dad's place. But I probably took his place when I got the baby crib.
He wound up with it.
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine, and I can clearly tell, you have a great deal of admiration for your mother and and for the family members in addition who helped you and your siblings through that time.
It takes a family, you know, not only immediate family, but your siblings and your grandparents. Yeah.
How did that shape your life as you went on, you know, being so close and then not
I became a carpenter.
Yeah. Oh, wow. There you go.
And a home builder. And
do you think that was because?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to be like my dad. And everything I do in life in the back of my head, would my dad be proud of me? Yeah. So I try to do the best.
That's a great moral compass to have.
Yeah. And last week I went to the cemetery and washed their headstone and meditated a little bit. And I do that. I don't care who it is in life that I've known. Even my stepdad, I'll go visit his grave. He was a good guy. In my opinion, he was a good guy. So Mom was a widow till 1955.
Okay.
And she married Henry Ackerman. My dad's name was Henry as well. Henry Ackerman. And he kind of took me under his wing more so than my other three brothers. And he was instrumental in the building of the Park Plaza Hotel down on
really?
Kings Highway.
Yeah.
And he still worked for the Copplers until his death. And he'd take me down there when they'd call for emergencies. And when I was 14, I started working there that summer. I didn't get paid because you couldn't have a 14-year-old boy working. But I went down with my dad, and I was the gopher if they needed a tool or a cup of coffee or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Copplers helped me, too. The Copplers owned the Park Plaza, and they built what we know as the concert hall down on Grand Avenue. It was the St. Louis Theater. Copplers built that. And so my dad got me a job down there, and I was an apprentice tile setter, even though carpentry was my love. And I became an apprentice. First I was a helper, then an apprentice, and then I finally became a journeyman tile setter. This is at the time when they were joining the two hotels together, and they built the Coruscant room, and they remodeled the whole Chase.
Yeah.
And so I worked down there for about 14 years.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so my youngest daughter, she was married in the church that her mother and I were married at. And she kind of retraced her steps. She had why did we go to the Cheshire?
Oh, her bridal shower.
Okay, when Barb and I were married, we had our wedding breakfast at the Cheshire Inn. And in those days, you probably can appreciate, in those days, you didn't eat for 12 hours before taking communion. So I was working midnights then, and I hadn't eaten. And we got up on the altar, and they started with the incense, and I passed out on the altar.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So they brought me back around, and the marriage went on. And so we were married at All Souls Church in Overland, which isn't far from here.
Yeah.
And my daughter was married at All Souls Church, and she had some kind of a function at the Cheshire Inn, as her mother and I had. Then she went to the Jewel Box in Forest Park, which her mother and I did. And she had her wedding reception in the Coruscant room at the Chase Hotel, Coruscant lobby, because she knew, and when I worked there, I just was in awe of the grand weddings and receptions that were at those facilities, whether it be up on the roof or in the Coruscant room.
Absolutely, that roof as well.
Yeah. So that made me happy.
So what years were you working at the Chase?
I would have started there in 1954 as a 14-year-old.
Okay.
And then I didn't leave until I found out I can make more money as a carpenter on my own, which I was doing on weekends, and I was making more money on the weekends than I was through the whole week. So I left there probably 1967.
Okay.
And then I worked for myself until late 69. And my uncle, whose wife was the one that was sending my mother money, he pretty much owned the town. He was a self-made man. You know what a spreader body is, or on a truck, the V-shaped body that spreads salt on the street?
Yeah.
Well, they were initially designed to spread fertilizer on farm fields, and then they adapted them to spread salt. It was just a different rate of throwing out. He invented that. The only place in the world where they were made was Jerseyville, Illinois. He was the largest employer in Jerseyville. But he started his life, he and my aunt, in the timber business. He cut timber. And their two daughters were born in a tent in the woods. He went to 5th or 6th grade as far as he got in his formal education. And at the time that he started Bauman Manufacturing, he was the largest producer of railroad ties in America. And he would work, sun up till sundown and just stay in the woods so he could get started early. Every minute counted. And he had sold lumber to a man up in Taylorville who had the concept for this spreader body. But he was making the bodies out of wood, still the same V configuration with a drag belt, and used parts out of farm equipment. And he just couldn't get it going. But in the meantime, he had accrued a debt of $600, which was a lot of money back in probably 1937, to my uncle. And he gave him a proposition that if he would forgive the debt, he would give him the rights for the spreader body. So my uncle did it, and he moved the operation to Jerseyville, and he knew that the only way it was going to work was to put steel bodies on those things. So they started building the steel spreader bodies, and it just mushroomed because instead of going down a field with a truck they dropped the tailgate and there were fingers, and the limestone would come out on the fingers, but it would do the width of a truck. So the spreader body would throw that out 24 feet. So they could do twice as much, 3 times as much spreading with no waste with the Bauman spreader bodies. And the same way with salt on the street. Yeah, and in 1964, they went to Germany and talked to the administrator. I'm going to call him the administrator of highways in Germany. And that man told him that 90% of the ice control on the Autobahn highway was Bauman manufactured.
Oh, my goodness.
So at that point, my uncle was contemplating building a factory in Germany. But I guess he discussed it with his wife, and they were getting up in age, and it was too early to move on that endeavor, so they didn't. And he retired, and in '69, he was at our house for Thanksgiving. And he was a big man, and it was his habit to just go and lay down on the living room floor and take a nap after eating. He didn't care where he was. So he was at our house, at my mom's house, and he woke up and said, "Jim, come here." And when Uncle George said, "Jimmy, come there," Jimmy went there. And he made a proposition that I never truly appreciated till maybe 2 years ago. He said, "Jimmy, how would you like to come to Jerseyville and build some houses?" And he wrote on an envelope that I still have, "I, George Hofstetter of Jerseyville, and Jim Lumma of St. Louis, agree to build from 6 to 10 houses to see how profitably they can be built. I will title all the ground into Jim's name. I will loan him all the money interest-free for 9 months from the start of the house." So I had 9 months to get the house started and sold, interest-free money. And I think 2 years later, well, initially I'd built 5 houses and didn't sell a one because I was an outsider into a small town where everybody that was a school teacher or whatever, in the summertime they considered themselves carpenters. So it was a tough nut to crack. But they eventually sold. But by that time I owed my uncle $175,000, which in 1970 might as well have been $1 million.
Absolutely,
It scared me to death. But it worked out. And 165 houses later, here I am in your building.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Why did you start to appreciate it more a couple of years ago?
I didn't realize what an opportunity he was giving me.
Yeah.
And my aunt told me, and I didn't know this, but she had colon cancer before we moved up there, and didn't have a good diagnosis, and she died a year after I moved up there with brain cancer. But I didn't know it. She looked healthy, and she told me, she said, "Jimmy, you pay attention to Uncle George, and he'll show you how to make money." And that's true. He did try to show me how to make money, but as I told you first, I tried to do everything to the best that my father would be proud of me. And Uncle George was one that would build something to specs, but not a good house, cheap this, cheap that, one coat of paint. And so those are the steps. What he did teach me was, if you're going to become a home builder, you're not going to build it out of a lumber yard, and you didn't. So he taught me how to buy. Of course, he had the money he was loaning me. We bought whole tractor-trailer loads of lumber from Georgia, yellow pine. And we bought the drywall by the railroad car. And I was paying $1.50 for drywall, not 6 cents is what it would cost me. And so you eliminate the middleman.
Right.
And not only did we incorporate a Lumma Construction in Jerseyville, but we started a real estate company. So you eliminate that 6%
Sure.
for the sale of a house. You got your own company. You hire one person with a license, and you paid him a stipend every week against commissions, future commissions. And so you eliminate the middleman, and that's the only way you can survive. All of St. Anne's and all the houses out in St. Charles, they bought those ground before World War II.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, for $5, $10 an acre. Now it's $30,000 an acre.
Absolutely.
See? Yeah. There's no way that you can pay $30,000 an acre and do all the development. Well, you can if you're in Ladue and they got the $300,000 tear downs to put a new house on. You know?
Sure, yeah.
But you're selling to Joe Blow, general public. Yeah. And if you're selling government financed FHA houses, you can't do that unless you can cut some corners. But so my uncle was trying to show me how to make money, you know.
Yeah.
And
so there's a difference between building houses and making money.
Yeah. So I suffered through that for maybe 5 or 8 years in Jerseyville, and then came back to St. Louis, where I knew a couple of architects here that I had worked with previously. And we started doing work that I loved and work that the customer loved, because we started building in Ladue and Frontenac, but we were putting additions onto homes. And they knew what they wanted, and cost wasn't an object. So I could put an addition on a house, and you couldn't tell that it wasn't built there in 1930. People, it irks me to no end. Do you see somebody with a dark red brick house, and they get an addition put on, and it's kind of an orange-red brick? You can send brick, take 20 brick, and send them to Texas, and they'll duplicate it exactly. They'll play around with the temperature of the burning of them, and it's exactly. And we did that in houses in St. Louis that had stone foundations. We'd pour a 14-inch wall with a step in it, and we'd put a stone foundation appearance on it out of real stone, natural stone. And we just loved doing that. We duplicated woodwork, and we duplicated everything, so you could walk from one room into that and not know that it wasn't 1915, you know. And that's what I love to do.
Yeah.
See? And that's something my father would have been proud of. See? Yeah.
Quality.
Yeah.
Quality.
Yeah, quality.
Yeah.
Quality instead of quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I did till I retired, and I retired because I got cancer and couldn't regain my strength or my stature after that.
When did you get cancer?
It's 16 years ago. Yeah.
What kind of cancer were you
I had prostate cancer.
Prostate cancer.
Yeah. So I wanted to take care of it, so I had it removed. And like I say, you were uncomfortable. I couldn't do any lifting, so I was 70, I guess, at the time, close to 70, 68, and I retired then, and I regret it. I do.
What parts do you regret? Because you can't do anything about the strength part.
Well, once, and I was a hands-on guy. You know,
sure.
I did it all. You know, I designed it, a drafting table, and we did it all. I had my brother and a son working for me and a laborer, and when I had to give it up, I lost them. So you're starting all over again. You know, and it takes a team, and I was too old to start a new team, so I hung it up. Yeah. But I do miss it.
Yeah.
Regret might be a strong word, but I do miss it.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's that part of my life. And then I told you how I met my wife, and we were married 5 years later. And I was up in the attic going through some stuff, and I found some cards up there that implied that we got married a year before we did. And my wife even had a wedding shower, with gifts a year before we actually got married. And I didn't remember any of this. I should have. And I said, honey, what's all of this stuff? She said, you don't remember? I said, no. She said, we were supposed to get married in 1961. I said, well, what happened? She said, your mother wouldn't let you. I said, Mom wouldn't let me get married. She said, no. I said, why? She said, you didn't have a job. So that was good thinking of my mother's part.
Yeah.
What I had done when I left the Chase Hotel, I had the opportunity to buy the lease on a brand new Gulf filling station. And I thought, I'm going to make $1 million here. You don't make any money in the filling station business. But I was a pretty good mechanic. In high school, I'd buy a car that was a good-looking car, but the motor was shot or it needed something. Yeah. And I could fix it up and sell it for double what I paid for it. So I figured I could do that in this filling station. And Gulf Oil had a representative that would come by once a month and check, make sure you were keeping the johns clean and doing what they wanted you to do. And he said, Mr. Lumma, he said, you're not here to do repair work on automobiles. You're here to sell Gulf Oil products. And with that, my balloon burst. And so it wasn't long after that I got out of the filling station business, and that's at the point I didn't have a job.
I see.
So we languished for a little while, and my stepfather, got me back on at the Chase Hotel, and Mr. Koppler had me moved from department to department as a department head. So I was head of convention service, which means I had a crew that had to set up the tables and whatever for conventions. And then I did that for 6 or 8 months, and then they moved me to night head housekeeper. Well, a night head housekeeper is responsible for all the public areas, all the public bathrooms on the first floor, the lobbies, the carpets, the Chase Club, whatever. And I did that, and Barb and I got married while I was still doing that. And then it was at that point that I found out that I could do better on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I left without ever giving thanks to my stepfather or Mr. Koppler. But they were training me in all facets of the hotel business.
Yeah, I guess they were looking at you as a prospect, so to speak.
Yeah, because they knew Hank.
Yeah.
Yeah. They knew him very well. Yeah.
So we've talked about how you met your wife in the wedding. Tell me about marriage and raising your family and your children.
We were good kids.
It's on camera for the record, and you might have been caught right there. But we can always edit it out.
Give me the unedited edition.
Yeah,
okay?
You get the raw cut.
Yeah, no. So we bit our tongue for 5 years. Okay. So on our wedding night, 9 months later, we had Jimmy, my son.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
Good
was
restraint.
Oh God, the nuns would have been proud of me. Let me get back to the nuns not being proud of me. So. In the schools at the time, Catholic schools anyhow, when you were tardy, you had to go to the office, get a tardy slip, and go to your homeroom.
Sure.
And 4 tardy slips means you had to bring your parents in. So I would pick Barb up, and we'd come to school every morning. And, of course, we were tardy after the second bell, whatever. And it was the 4th one, and we knew it was the 4th one, so we didn't go to school at all. We skipped school. And we figured we'd write each other a note from our parents saying that we were sick, whatever. So Sister Mary Barbara got on to us and asked us what we did all day. You know what goes on in an older woman, nun, what goes on her. So we said, Sister, we spent the whole day in the art museum in Forest Park, which we did. She didn't buy that. So she asked me to leave. So our parents came down, and they determined that we should divorce ourselves somewhat, because I was seeing her in the morning and taking her home from school, and then after dinner we'd go to Steak and Shake, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, she was perfect. She still is perfect. So I went to... I left Mercy I guess it was about the middle of my junior year, and finished out the junior year at Rittner High School. And knowing that they were building a brand new Catholic high school in Florissant called St. Thomas Aquinas. So I went my senior year to St. Thomas Aquinas, and that's my story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. So
And then Barb and I did get married.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sisters of Mercy had a reunion this year for all the students that ever went to Mercy, Aquinas, and Rosary. And Barb and I went, and I called the nuns and asked them if I could come, even though I didn't graduate from there, but my wife did. And they said, sure. So I said, Sister, you know what I've got on my front porch? And she said, I have no idea what you've got on your front porch. I said, I've got the cornerstone from Mercy High School. And she about fell off her chair. She said, we've been looking for that. We called the archdiocese, and they said, no, some young man requested it, and we gave it to him. But they wouldn't give her my name. So when I said I had it, I mean, I might as well have been Jesus Christ.
Yeah, you're the hero.
So I said, I'll bring it. It weighed 700 pounds. I said, I'll bring that down with my sons, and we'll put that on display for this reunion. Oh, and she said, we'd love that. So after that, Bridget and my other daughter said, well, why don't you just give that to them? So I called her back and said, Sister, Barbara Cruz Lumma is going to gift this to you. Oh, she was so thankful.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a beautiful on the front. It said Mercy High School, 1948. And there was a time capsule built into it that somebody had taken out already.
Wow. Oh, they already taken it
yeah,
out? Okay.
But we made a new time capsule from this year and put some stuff in it and sealed it up and put it in there. And I had a capstone made for it, a 4-inch by a 36-inch by 20-inch capstone to sit on top of that so they would have a place to sit. Mm-hmm. Because it was placed in, do you know where the Sisters of Mercy are here? They've got 72 acres in the heart of Frontenac.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, must be $1 billion worth of property anyhow.
Oh.
But then that's their mother house there. That's where young women would go to become Sisters of Mercy. And it's also a retirement home there. Okay. So this is where the reunion was. And they've got a walking trail through well-manicured woods that goes around this whole property where they can go and meditate. So they set this bench down there, and I made its capstone on it. And I had the logo for the Sisters of Mercy etched into it. And on the front edge of it, it said, gifted by Barbara Lumma, class of 60.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is a memorial to my wife, sitting down there. And Sister, she knew that I didn't graduate from Mercy. I don't think she knew the circumstance. But she said, Jimmy, today you'd be an A student. So that made me feel good. So we had an enjoyable time. But we stayed down there for 2 nights, I guess. It's a long, drawn-out affair. Yeah. And they had a dinner dance down there. And, yeah, it was a good time.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Tell me about not only your marriage, and obviously you still feel the same way. I mean, which is incredible to hear, and raising family.
2 years ago, on my wife's 80th birthday, our 60th wedding anniversary, I arranged a party for her. She didn't know anything about this. Have you ever been to Grafton?
Yes, I've driven through. I haven't spent a lot of time there, but I'm familiar with it, yes.
Grafton Winery. You know where the Grafton Winery is?
Absolutely, up there. Yeah.
Okay, we had half of that building, and I hired an 18-piece orchestra with tuxedos and a sit-down dinner with wine, and the wine label was a picture of our wedding. Oh. Yeah. So this was our anniversary and her birthday, and we invited 72 people. Yeah, I had 72 friends and relatives there, and she had know nothing about it. We walked into the room, and she didn't know what was going on. But everybody's entitled to a blowout party once in their life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that had to be, I mean, what was her reaction? I mean, that had to just be incredible.
Oh, yeah. And we had a head table there, and I had a cake made. I took a picture of our wedding cake, and they emulated that whole cake, and it was gorgeous. Oh. And the centerpiece on the head table was, it duplicated her bouquet when we were married. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And my kids all helped me with it. Yeah, it was good. It was good.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
It is good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm obligated. I know this is a cliche question, but the love and appreciation you have for your wife, this I'm just letting you know. Maybe you're aware of this. This isn't common. I mean, this is top 0.1% here. So what is the secret? I know that's a cliche question. I don't like asking it, but I'm curious.
I think we both came from good families. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And they were exemplary. And Barb often comments that there's no divorce among children. None of them have been divorced. None of their families have been divorced. There are my children's in-laws, no divorce. So divorce was a send you to hell thing when I was a kid,
Right.
or close to it.
Right.
So we just don't believe in it. And if you don't believe in something, then you carry on as best you can.
Yeah.
But we've never had those moments. We've been like that forever. And I oftentimes tell her, it's not you and me. We became we. It's we. So any place we go, it's Jim and Barb. Jim and Barb. Or Jim, where is Barb?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and all of our children have good marriages.
Yeah.
And our grandkids. The only disappointment I've got is not being married in the church. They're married in a church. No, some of them weren't even married in a church. But I hope it all works out for them.
Yeah.
But I'm going from old school when I say that's a disappointment.
Sure.
To today, that wouldn't be a disappointment.
Yeah, I understand.
So yeah.
What considering how strong your marriage is, and you now have children and with strong marriages as well, what was important to you and your wife when you were raising your children, as far as teaching them the values or how you raised your kids?
That's a good question. One, you don't lie. You never lie. And you respect your mother, or respect your parents. And all my grandkids too, pitch in. They're just... And we moved to Jerseyville. That's a big part in raising kids. Had we stayed in the St. Louis environment, I don't know if they'd all turned out the same.
Why is that? That's really interesting. Why is that?
I think the norms and the values of St. Louis in general have gone down the tubes. When I was a kid, you could walk anywhere. Let me back up here. When I was in grade school, my father had already passed away, and I took a pistol to school. It was a notable pistol. It was a It was a Colt 38-40. It's worth $14,000 today.
Wow.
That's how good a pistol it was. So I took it to show it to the guys, And the nun said, "Jimmy, have you got a gun?" I said, "Yes, sister." And she said, "Well, give it to me." And she put it in her desk drawer. At the end of school, she gave it back to me and said, "Don't bring it anymore." And that was all there was to it. And my dad's youngest brother, after my father passed away, kind of took me under his arms. And he lived in Wellston, which was a good community then.
Mm-hmm.
And he would call me occasionally and say, "Jimmy, I'm going hunting tomorrow. Would you like to go hunting with me?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, you got to get on the bus and come down to Wellston, and we'll leave from here about 6 in the morning." So I put on my hunting garb. I was probably 11 years old. And I got my shotgun, and I got on the bus with my shotgun exposed. We went to Wellston. We went hunting. At the end of the day, I come back with a few rabbits and my shotgun. We got on the bus. And nothing was said about it. I mean, we'd have been on the news today, had that happened today. So we moved to Jerseyville, which was at that time a town of 6,500. Now it's 9,500. And everybody knows everybody. And everybody looks out for each other's kids. And it's basically a farming community. And all of that came into play as to, what kind of children we raised. Mm. Now, I know this one over here, and I didn't know this until she had a curfew. She'd come home on curfew. We'd all go to bed. And what did you do?
I went to bed, Dad.
She snuck out the window.
Oh, is that right? Nicely done, Bridget.
But she's the best of the best. She really is.
Yeah.
She is. Her and her husband both. All of my kids are great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Barb and I have been married for 62 years. 63 coming up. She's been my girlfriend for 67 years. Yeah, we were both kids when we met, and that's important. I'm always on my grandboys. I've got 9 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, her daughter.
Yeah.
That was my first grandchild, so she's the princess.
Yeah.
So this year she had a little daughter. So it's my great-grandchild.
Yeah.
She's the new princess.
New princess.
New princess. So my boys are 20, 30 years old. You got a girlfriend? No, they don't have a girlfriend. You know, this is you start cultivating this when you're 12 and 13 years old. You know, just holding hands or buying her a popsicle or something. You know, but so now they're 30 years old and they're looking, and all the good ones are gone. You missed the boat. Yeah.
Well, this sets me up perfectly to this question, because I know you're going to have a lot of opinions on it. How do you feel the world has changed in your lifetime? And you don't have to limit it to one thing, because I have a feeling you're going to have multiple. And what, in your opinion, has changed for the better? And what, in your opinion, has changed for the worse?
I am a conservative, ultra-conservative, regardless of political party. You know, if the right person came along in the other party that I felt was conservative, and the last one would be probably President Kennedy. You know, he didn't rob from the people. He said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for them. And when
you were old enough to vote for him then, right?
I was just, yeah. So I was just, the whole change in the complexity, or my awareness of politics, has just gone down the drain.
When did that start?
When we started spending money we didn't have.
So you were a big deficit person then, I guess.
When I was growing up, we were still paying for World War II, but we paid for it with what they called an excise tax, which is a tax that didn't go on forever, but when whatever that was dedicated to was paid off, the excise tax was gone. An excise tax was paid on luxury items. If you bought a Cadillac instead of a Ford, you paid excise tax on the Cadillac. If you bought a mink coat or a diamond ring, or even new tires, there was excise tax on them. And that was eventually paid off. And today, we look for grants. There's no such thing as a grant. A grant is coming from a federal government that's been broke for 20 years. And even in local government, Jerseyville, they passed, if they wanted a new road or whatever it was that was noteworthy, they passed bond issues, which means that the city of Jerseyville was paying for whatever they were doing, which is the proper way to do things. You don't spend money that nobody has. So the value of the dollar has gone down.
Yes.
And that's my prime concern is we're digging a hole that we can't get out of. And I was told the other day, I knew that China was buying a lot of farm ground. And somebody told me, truth or not, I don't know, and I have no reason to doubt it, that the farm ground that they were buying was surrounding a military base. So at Fort Leonard Wood or Scott Air Force Base, the farms around there, if you were to check into it, were owned by a foreign entity. And as a kid growing up in the 40s, I didn't think that any foreign entity was allowed to own ground in America. That's changed. And the fact that we don't protect the borders, that's changed. So, it's just discouraging to me.
Did you have similar concerns? I realize some of these are newer issues, so you couldn't have had similar concerns, say, in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, but is this something that you've noticed over, say, the last quarter century, or were you kind of feeling this way in the 70s,
No,
80s,
I think
90s?
it's the last 20, 30 years.
Okay.
But then when you analyze it, how many people snuck into America from Canada that were of French origin? And that's true. We live in Jerseyville. We're right on the Illinois River and Mississippi River. And a lot of our friends have French last names, and in conversation they'll say that their great-great-grandfather came down the river from Canada.
Yeah.
And we can't. We try to feed the world. We try to protect the world. And protecting the world is okay if you take it to its finality. But we'll spend billions of dollars on it, then pull out, and it just goes right back to hell where it was. Excuse my language. Yeah. So as an 83-year-old, I know the world that used to be, and it's become something totally different. I thought Truman was a good president. He was Democrat. But you don't spend money you don't have, period. I think what Mr. Eisenhower did, although people, think the interstate system is fantastic, and it is, but it needs to be maintained. And the maintenance is put on the states. And the states get their money from a grant from the federal government. Yeah. So he created a monster that nobody can pay for. And it probably started back with Mr. Roosevelt in the Great Depression. He pulled us out of the Depression, but he opened up Pandora's box.
Are there things that you've seen, and I'm sure there are, take your pick, whether it be the last 20 or last 50 years for that matter, that you go, man, this is so much better than what it was that I grew up with in the 40s or 50s?
But then you have to ask yourself, at what cost is it better?
So, for example, one thing that I'm sure you probably have an opinion on would be...
I got my first one 6 weeks ago.
Did you really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
iPhone?
I'm about ready to give it back to him. Well, here's my opinion on that. All that's ever happened in the world is in that little development, or in your wristwatch.
Yeah.
But let's say that we should get in a shooting war, and let's say that Union Electric, they're not in business anymore, Ameren is not here. You can't charge that thing. How much knowledge are you going to have up here? Can you add 2 and 2?
Yeah.
Mathematics. Education, I think, has fallen downhill. I mean, when you get finished, and here's another thing I heard, truth or not, the city of St. Louis graduating average is 35%. You can stay home, never go to school, multiple choice, and get better than 35%. They just pass them on out. They don't hold them back or send them to summer school or saying you're not going to graduate. They give them a diploma. That's not right. When I went to high school, here I'm going back, I went to McBride High School, which is a college prep high school, as SLU is, and the passing grade at McBride was 83.
Wow.
And I think at the public schools at that time it was 65. So that's a 20-point difference. And oddly enough, foreign languages, Spanish wasn't even offered. Nobody, there was no Spanish influence in this country at that point. So you had French, German, and Latin. Those were your 3 foreign language options at McBride, and I'm sure at other schools too.
Yeah.
But education has just gone to heck.
Yeah.
You don't have to take mathematics. You can take a rowboat in the summertime and get college credit for it.
All right. I'm looking forward to your answer, especially considering your family and your marriage. What is your most cherished family tradition? Why is it so important to you?
Family tradition. I would think is when my whole family gets together, which is becoming more infrequent with grandkids marrying, and would be a Christmas dinner or Easter dinner.
Yeah.
You get together then. We had a beautiful get together at Bridget's house this year.
Yeah.
She fixed a beautiful table, and all my kids were there, and grandchildren. Most of my grandchildren were there. Yeah, and it brought back memories where you got 20 people or so.
You got to feel a great deal of pride when you see your whole family.
Oh yeah, and see how well they're doing. Yeah. I know my dad would be proud of them. Yeah.
Final question.
Yes, sir.
I can't wait to hear this one too. Well, you know what? It was an unintentional. We will have a final question, but I forgot to ask about this. Your family is related to Abraham Lincoln?
Correct.
What is the backstory on this?
Okay, I told you my mother's family came here in 1633.
Yes.
They have fought in every war that this country has ever had. They were instrumental in a lot of influence in St. Louis back at the turn of the century, I guess. You know where the White House is, what they call the White House in South County?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a retreat, right?
Yeah,
I've been to retreats there.
That was built by Mr. Mudd, tooth and nail, which is my mother's people. And I've got the Mudd, the history of the Mudds in America. It's 2 books, 2,000 pages, and I can trace my lineage back for 14. They came, they landed. Oh, and the first English-speaking Catholic priest in America was my grandmother's family.
Oh, my goodness. He
came over in 1633 on that boat, and as they landed, he said the first Mass. And White was his name, W-H-I-T-E. And my grandmother, Mudd, was a White. Yeah. And we can trace them back. Yeah. So they landed in, and they founded, at the behest of Lord Baltimore, Maryland. Maryland was part of Virginia. They took that off, and it was, so Maryland. So they lived in Maryland for 175 years, and they acquired a lot of ground. You know Dr. Mudd that fixed John Wilkes Booth's leg?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. His place is still there, and that's part of the original Mudd thing from 1633. And the Mudds acquired their ground by Thomas Mudd marrying Mr. Borman, B-O-A-R-M-A-N's daughter. Mr. Borman had thousands of acres, and when he died, he didn't have a son, so he left that to Thomas Mudd, his son-in-law. And that got whittled down over the years, and so in 1785, which was right after the Revolutionary War, Henry Mudd came to Kentucky, and Kentucky was a new place then, and I don't know how that government giveaway on ground went then, but he went through the woods for 2 days supposedly with an axe in hand and marked his territory, and that turned out to be 1,200 acres in Kentucky. And pardon me, Abraham Lincoln lived in Bardstown, Kentucky. How many Abraham Lincolns were there? That's a question I'm going to prize to you. Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay, there were 3. Abraham Lincoln, the president, his grandfather was Abraham Lincoln. And as was at the time, you named your first child after their grandfather. So Abraham Lincoln, the senior, had 2 sons. One was Thomas Lincoln, who was the president's father, and Mordecai Lincoln. Mordecai Lincoln married Mary Mudd. Mary Mudd would be direct lineage to my mother. So that's how that goes. So Mordecai Lincoln's son was Abraham Lincoln. Thomas Lincoln's son was Abraham Lincoln, both of the same generation, and they were first cousins. So that's in a roundabout way how we're related to Abraham Lincoln. And then, so Mary Lincoln married Mordecai Lincoln, and she had a son. She had a daughter that married another Lincoln that was probably a cousin to the president, too, yeah. And we're related to Grant's farm out there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, have you ever been to the house, the old farmhouse?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right. I can't think of the name of those people, but they were related to us. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of neat when you go back in history.
Yeah. I knew once you said my family arrived here in 1633, you had done some research.
Oh, yeah, we've been here so they lived in Maryland for 175 years, and then in 1785, and I've got this documented, that after the Revolutionary War, they came to Kentucky and lived there for there's still Mudds in Kentucky. And then they settled in Kentucky in Bardstown, and they moved up to Grayson County, and a couple of brothers came to Missouri. They became lawyers and doctors. There was a lot of doctors in the Mudd family. Mm-hmm. And one of those was the donor for the White House. The White House property.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, and also there's a building. I don't know if it's the law school. There's a building at Washington University that's got Mudd's name on it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's a good name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. This is the real final question. what do you know now about living a happy life and successful life that you didn't know when you were 20 years old? What wisdom would you love for your family to hear?
Good question. If I had to do over again, I wouldn't personally change a thing. My two sons, growing up, I was still building homes in Jerseyville then. They tag along. And my youngest son, Henry, chose not to go to college, but to stay working with me. And he's an excellent, excellent carpenter. And Jimmy, my son, worked with me all through his teen years. And when he graduated high school, the college that he wanted to go to and the course study he wanted to do was filled up, so he had to wait another year. So he worked with me for a year. And he's a good mechanic. And my girls are good girls. They do. They cook. This one over here, she runs 90 miles an hour, 20 hours a day. Yeah. And her husband's just a swell guy. Yeah. They've all got good people. And I don't think I'd change a thing. Just set a good example, and hope that they want to do the same. And Ricky did. He came back and he worked for a local contractor in Jerseyville, and then went to work for the city of Jerseyville, and now he's working for the Alton Water Department, which are good jobs. And he's got a good wife. She's a school teacher. My daughter, Heather, that's another story. She set her sights, probably her sophomore or junior year in high school, she wanted to be an astronaut. That's when the excitement of what we were doing was going on. So she set her sights to educate herself toward that. And when she graduated school, grade school, or high school, she went to the University of Illinois and got a degree in mathematics, and she also got, I don't know if it's a degree thing, but she took it there. She became an aviator, got her pilot's license.
Wow.
And when she graduated, the government had shut down the astronautic program. Yeah. So she went to, where'd she go?
Well, she just started flying.
No.
She was a flight instructor.
Yeah, after she graduated, she was a flight instructor. Yeah. And one of her young students asked her to go out on a date. She was 4 or 5 years older than him. She said, no, it wouldn't be proper because I'm your instructor. So they kind of left it at that. And then she went on, she got the opportunity to go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and become a pilot on a charter service, chartered airplanes. So she accumulated hours in multi-engine. She already had a license for multi-engine, but she didn't have the 1,200 hours you need to go to work for the big boys. So she did that for a couple of years and got the opportunity to go to work for Northwest Airlines, and she did that. And when she did that, there was another young man that got a job with, and it was the same guy that asked her for a date.
Oh, my goodness.
So they started dating, and that's now my son-in-law.
How about that?
Yeah.
And
he was flying the 777s to China and Germany and Japan, but he was always a co-pilot, first officer, and he didn't want to leave that because the money's difference weren't that much, and that's where his seniority was until this year.
Is that right? Just literally history? Is that right?
Yeah. So he became a captain. But it bumped him back down to the 737s, not the 777. But the pay grade is better. But the disadvantage to that, and the reason he didn't do it until now, was his seniority as a captain he's at the bottom of the list. So that just means that he doesn't get to choose the days he wants to flight. So if somebody wants Sunday off or whatever, he'll have to take that. But that's not a big deal. Yeah. So he's a good boy, but now he's got his captain's license. Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Jim, this has been a pleasure. I really have enjoyed it. I thank you for sharing your stories, and it's been an honor to listen to them and be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was enjoyable for me to recall some things in life, and I'm sure there's a million things I missed, but I think we covered pretty much.
We got a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.